The moment Arya Vance realized she had destroyed an innocent man's life, it was already too late. The glass walls of her 42nd floor office reflected a city glittering under the bright midday sun, but inside her chest there was only darkness. She had built her empire from nothing, fought her way into rooms where powerful men once laughed at her ambition, and turned Vance Innovations into a billion-dollar corporation before she turned 40. Yet the memory of one quiet single father walking out of her building with a cardboard box in his trembling hands haunted her more than any failed deal ever could. Before we begin this emotional journey, if you believe in kindness, redemption, and the power of second chances, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Journal. Your support helps spread stories that remind the world compassion still matters. Arya had always believed that business required toughness. She had grown up in a cramped apartment above a grocery store, watching her own mother juggle 2 jobs after her father abandoned them. Vulnerability, she learned early, was expensive. So she hardened herself. She sharpened her instincts. She refused to trust easily. When a major investor threatened to pull funding after confidential information leaked from the company, Arya did not hesitate. She demanded names. She demanded answers. And when the internal investigation pointed toward a mid-level project manager named Elias Rowan, she signed the termination papers without meeting his eyes. Elias had been with the company for 6 years. He was punctual, disciplined, and rarely spoke about his personal life. But everyone knew he left exactly at 5 every day, no matter what crisis loomed. Some called him unambitious. Others whispered he lacked dedication. They didn't know he had a 6-year-old daughter named Maribel who waited at the daycare window every afternoon, scanning every car that pulled into the parking lot, terrified her father might not come. The day Arya fired him, the sun shone mercilessly bright. Elias stood in front of her desk, tall but visibly exhausted, his navy tie slightly crooked. He tried to explain that he had nothing to do with the data leak. He said someone must have used his login credentials. He insisted he would never jeopardize the job that paid for his daughter's asthma medication. Arya barely listened. Her voice was cold, clipped, efficient. The company's reputation came first. She told him security would escort him out. She did not look at his eyes when they filled with silent disbelief. That evening, Elias picked up Maribel later than usual. The daycare director had almost called child services. His hands shook as he signed the release form. He forced a smile for his daughter, who threw herself into his arms and chattered about finger painting and the sunflowers they had planted at school. He carried her home like he carried everything else in life, quietly and alone. Within weeks, bills piled up. Elias applied everywhere. He sent out dozens of resumes. But the tech world was small, and word of his dismissal traveled fast. Prospective employers hesitated. A stain like corporate misconduct did not wash away easily. Arya, meanwhile, moved on. Or at least she tried to. The investor crisis passed. The company stabilized. But something gnawed at her. It was not guilt at first. It was unease. A feeling that something about the investigation had been rushed. 3 months later, a junior cybersecurity analyst discovered a hidden backdoor in the system, a vulnerability exploited by an external contractor who had quietly disappeared overseas. The digital trail proved it clearly. Elias's credentials had been cloned. He had been framed by circumstance and faulty security oversight. When Arya read the report, her heart pounded so violently she thought she might faint. She felt the room tilt. For the first time in her career, she realized she had allowed fear of losing money to outweigh fairness. She asked HR to contact Elias immediately. But he had moved. The apartment he had rented for years had a vacant sign hanging crookedly in the window. The daycare center said Maribel no longer attended. No forwarding address was listed. Arya did something she had not done in years. She left her office during business hours without a meeting scheduled. She drove through neighborhoods she had once known as a child, asking around, following faint threads of information. It took days. Then weeks. Finally, she found him. It was a bright Tuesday morning at a small outdoor market on the edge of the city. The sun cast warm light across rows of handmade crafts and fresh produce. Arya stepped out of her sleek black car, heels clicking awkwardly against uneven pavement. She saw him behind a modest wooden booth selling refurbished electronics. His once crisp shirts were replaced by a simple rolled-up sleeve button-down. His posture was straighter than she remembered, but thinner. More tired. Maribel sat beside him, carefully drawing with colored pencils in a notebook. Every few minutes she looked up to smile at her father. Arya felt her throat close. Elias noticed her almost immediately. His eyes widened, but his expression did not crumble. He simply stood there, quiet and guarded. Arya walked toward him, feeling for the first time like the smallest person in the crowd. She did not begin with corporate language. She did not hide behind policy. She told him she was wrong. She told him she had failed him. She told him she had come to ask for forgiveness. The words tasted unfamiliar, heavy, and necessary. Elias listened without interrupting. His gaze shifted briefly to Maribel, who looked curiously at the elegant stranger speaking to her father. There was no anger in his eyes, only exhaustion that had settled too deep. Arya offered him his job back immediately. A promotion, even. Public acknowledgement of the company's mistake. Compensation for lost wages. She promised to clear his record entirely. Elias did not answer right away. The market bustled around them. A breeze lifted the edge of Maribel's drawing, revealing a crayon picture of a small house under a giant yellow sun. He finally told Arya that losing the job had nearly broken him. That there were nights he went without dinner so Maribel could eat properly. That he sold his car. That he almost lost custody when he couldn't pay for daycare. He said he had believed hard work was enough. He had believed loyalty mattered. But he also said something else. He said that in those months, he discovered something he never had time to see before. He discovered how to repair old radios and laptops. He discovered that people in the community needed affordable tech support. He discovered that Maribel loved sitting beside him at the market, learning how circuits worked. He discovered a slower, humbler life that, though financially fragile, was honest. Arya felt tears blur her vision under the relentless daylight. She had spent her life chasing growth charts and quarterly targets. She had never considered that success might be measured differently. She did not beg him to return after that. She simply asked what she could do to make things right. Elias surprised her again. He said he would return, but only if changes were made. He wanted stronger employee protections. Transparent investigations. Flexible schedules for parents. A childcare partnership for working single mothers and fathers. He wanted no one else to walk out of that building with their dignity stripped by haste. Arya agreed. The board resisted at first. The policies would cost money. Investors would question new spending. But Arya did not waver. For the first time, she led not from fear, but from accountability. Within months, Vance Innovations launched a family support initiative that became the first of its kind in the region. Employee morale soared. Turnover dropped dramatically. The company's public image strengthened, not weakened. Elias returned, not just as a manager, but as director of ethical operations. His experience shaped new systems. His voice carried weight because it had once been ignored. One afternoon, as sunlight streamed through the company's newly built on-site childcare center, Arya stood quietly watching Maribel paint at a tiny table alongside other children. Elias knelt beside his daughter, laughing softly as she proudly displayed her newest masterpiece, a bright yellow sun over a tall glass building. Arya realized something then. Wealth had given her power, but humility had given her purpose. Years later, employees would tell stories about the day the CEO stood in the lobby and publicly apologized to a single father. They would say it changed the culture forever. They would say it proved that leadership was not about being flawless, but about having the courage to admit when you were wrong. And Elias would sometimes share his own story at company orientations. He would speak about resilience, about fatherhood, about second chances. He would remind new hires that behind every ID badge was a human life far more complex than any spreadsheet could capture. On a warm spring morning, under a sky impossibly blue, the company hosted its annual community fair in the same outdoor market where Aria had once asked for forgiveness. This time, Vance Innovation sponsored small local vendors, including independent repair booths like the one Elias once ran. Children played in the sunlight. Parents laughed. Music drifted through the air. Aria stood beside Elias as Maribel, now older and confident, sold her own handmade solar-powered phone chargers at a small stand. Aria thought back to the day she signed the termination letter without hesitation. She understood now that power without compassion was emptiness disguised as strength. If this story has touched your heart so far, take a moment to like and share this video. Stories like these remind us that mistakes do not have to define us, but how we respond to them always will. Because forgiveness is not about erasing the past. It is about transforming it. As the afternoon sun bathed the market in golden light, Aria realized she had once believed she saved her company by firing a man she thought was guilty. In truth, the man she nearly destroyed had saved her from becoming the very kind of leader she once feared. Before this story ends, we have one special request. Comment the word "second chance" if you believe people can grow beyond their worst mistakes. The world often teaches us to protect pride at all costs. But sometimes the bravest thing a millionaire can do is stand in the daylight, admit she was wrong, and ask a single father for forgiveness. And sometimes, the most powerful response is not revenge, but grace. If this story moved you even a little, please engage with the video and let us know your thoughts. Your support helps. Kindness Journal continue sharing real, emotional stories that remind us kindness is never wasted. Because in the end, it was not money that rebuilt what was broken. It was humility. It was courage. And it was the simple, extraordinary decision to choose compassion over pride, in the bright light of day.